That being said, an opportunity came up via a friend of a friend for us to actually get a CBR 600. So that's not 100% confirmed at the moment, but that's where I'm leaning right now, is that we're just going to throw the 600 in, and it'll be a lot easier on everything.
3 days later.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have our donor bike. We're going to be taking this thing, we got a couple friends coming over, we're going to tear it down, get the motor out, get everything we're going to use out of it, and hopefully kind of see how everything fits a little bit. So let's get into it. We've got Dan helping us out again today. He's going to start with the battery, the fuse box, the ECU, and some of the other electrical components that's mounted underneath the seat and sort of work his way up from there. Meanwhile, I'm going to start with the gas tank. Once the tank's out of the way, you can access the airbox. I started going around trying to unscrew this, only to find out that it was really just sitting on top of the carburetors and I could just lift the whole thing off. But with that out of the way, you really have access to everything on top of the engine and can start to take out the harness. While we didn't have to remove the chain quite yet, we took a moment just to relieve tension on it. It became clear pretty quickly that this bike had been rewired at some point. We definitely took some time to label all the ends of the wiring harness, all the connectors, just so we know that later down the road when we switch from the bike hand controls to actual car driver controls, that we have everything accounted for. Things such as the headlights, we're going to have to splice those wires at some point to extend them far enough, so it just helps us keep track of everything. We chose to leave the radiator and cooling system installed on the motor still. It probably would have helped us out later on, giving us a little bit of extra clearance. But in order to actually fit the motor into the back of the Octane, we did have to remove the exhaust. That's eventually going to have to be modified. While Dan unbolted the headers, I got to work taking off the hand controls. At this point, we're pretty much ready to start disconnecting the motor from the frame. We used one of the wooden jacks that I had previously built for the frame to kind of hold the bike steady. We didn't have a kickstand or a chassis stand for this bike. We also didn't necessarily have to split the bike in two here, but it's certainly an effective approach. But once we had the motor out, we set it on top of another wooden block and went and grabbed our engine mounts. Now these mounts here that I'm assembling are designed for a 600cc micro sprint car, and it's certainly a nice kit that we bought. The problem just being that it wasn't quite designed for this motor. After I bolted in the top lugs, it was pretty clear that the bottoms were not going to align. So unfortunately we had to send that back and move forward with designing our own. Luckily the engine model that we pulled from GrabCAD was actually almost a perfect match to the actual physical motor. We were able to use that to design our own mounts and get those manufactured, and everything bolted up perfectly. We also have some tabs that are going to allow us to slide the entire motor once it's installed on the Octane. That's actually how we're going to take up our chain tension rather than sliding the rear axle like you do on a bike. That's not a desirable effect we want. So sliding the entire motor allows us to achieve the same thing, but do it in a place that we know we have clearance. Front mounts are very similar, they just bolt into the motor as well. Looking at the other front mount, unfortunately the coolant reservoir is going to have to be relocated, but that'll be a pretty easy fix. Once all of our mounts are installed, we're ready to actually hoist this thing up. We've got our load leveler here that we went ahead and bolted to the engine mounts, and our engine hoist that's gonna make this job a lot easier. This motor certainly isn't heavy at all. It's an easy two-person lift, but whenever you're trying to reach over tubes and fit it down in, it's a lot easier having the actual hoist. At this point, it's just a bit of a game, slowly lowering the motor into the back, making little adjustments here and there, working our way around a couple of the tubes. Like I said before, had we removed the radiator, it probably would have made our lives a good bit easier at this point. I did have to briefly remove the rear motor tabs just to clear everything. And once those tabs were reinstalled, we could lower the motor the rest of the way. Did a quick fit check with the exhaust just to make sure everything lines up right, not gonna have any issues. But that'll wrap up the work for today. The next big step is the rear axle, actually connecting everything to the wheels and then putting our chain back on. That's gonna happen in 2 weeks' time, where we complete that and actually weld the remaining tabs for the powertrain to the chassis. Shortly thereafter, we should actually be able to fire this thing up and try and spin some rear wheels for the first time. So I'm certainly excited for that. That's definitely going to be a big milestone for us. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.